Hello and welcome to this, the latest in our series of leadership interviews. I'm delighted to be joined now by Brian Kavanagh, the Chief Executive Officer of Horse Racing Ireland. A very warm welcome to Sport for Business, Brian.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for inviting me.
Great. How have you been coping yourself? The background there is slightly different to the wide open expanses of the Curragh or Longchamp or the great racing spots of the world that we'd normally be used to seeing you at.
It's been interesting on a personal level. Lovely to have a bit of time at home with the kids. Sometimes the office here feels a bit like a cell, but discovered a lot of new ways of doing things. We shut down the office about 4 weeks ago. We would normally have about 100 people in the office, and they've all worked from home. And indeed, when we had racing behind closed doors before the general lockdown, we ran those race meetings without the office operating, so we took entries and declarations from home. So every cloud has a silver lining, and one element of it is, I think, we won't go back, we'll never go back to the way things were before. I think there'll be different ways of doing things. So it's been very interesting. I mean, it's very difficult. I had to go over to the Curragh last Saturday morning myself just to go out onto the training grounds to see some horses. I hadn't seen horses for a few weeks, so I just met a few of the trainers and saw them training their horses, which was good. But the absence of sport, not just racing, is very palpable. It just shows how important it is to our lives and how much we build our lives around sport. Very much so.
A large part of the Irish sporting community is based around almost an amateur ethos that, we've got high performance, but racing is that kind of axis of part sport, part industry, that a racing stables can't just shut down and go away and lie down in a darkened room for 6 weeks or 3 months or however long it might be. What's the impact been like across the whole sector, do you think, of everything that we've had to go through?
It's been difficult, but you're right. Racing is different, and there's pluses and minuses with that. I mean, like every other business, every other sector, once you shut down and once you cut off, for parts of our business like race courses or bookmakers, you immediately shut off their ability to earn anything. It's not a tapering off. It's shutting down their ability to earn at all. But racing is probably the only sport in the country at the moment where the athletes are continuing to train on a daily basis. And there's an animal welfare aspect to that, and certainly when the government locked down, they identified specifically the breeding of horses and the training of horses should continue as an essential service. So as I said to you, last Saturday I was over in the Curragh and horses were being trained, jockeys were riding them, and that's still going. But without race meetings at the end of the day, there's no purpose to that. And while you can manage that for some time, the whole racing game, particularly in the flat, is built around, not to get too technical, but it's built around generations of horses. So horses are introduced to racing as 2-year-olds for the first time, and then their big season is as a 3-year-old when they're age 3. All the classic races, which are the races which define the best horses of a generation, and ultimately the horses that will go on to the breeding industry, take place. So if you miss those, you have a whole lost generation of horses, and that's a lot of horses in a country like Ireland, where we're the third largest producer of horses in the world. So the impact has been very difficult. And then, you say racing is a sport, it's a shop window for the breeding industry, it's a really fun day out. You then wonder long term about the impact of this post-COVID recession on people's businesses, people's personal wealth, people's ability to buy horses, own horses, sponsor races, corporate hospitality. All those issues are things we're going to have to reimagine and rethink, and there's opportunities in that as well as challenges.
You're right. I suppose the sport, though, is coming at it from a stronger position than it would have been, say, 5 years ago. Your racecourse attendance is up well over 1 million for the last couple of years. Sponsorship is up. The number of people who are owning and getting involved in syndicates. So will it be an advantage that you're coming off a stronger base, or is it more worrying that all of that momentum might now be sacrificed?
No, we won't. We must make sure it's not sacrificed. I think I think it is an advantage. I think, as you say, it's been a good period for racing, both on the track and off the track in Ireland. Over the last number of years, the horses have been successful, on the flat globally, and then over jumps at the marquee meetings like Cheltenham and Aintree. And we've had some good success, off the track. Every time when I was over the Curragh the weekend, looking at the stand there, saying, "God, wasn't it great? We completed that project before this happened." Ironically, we launched our strategic plan for the next 5 years, literally about 3 weeks before COVID arrived. And there's very, very exciting plans in that, and there's no reason why they should be lost. There will be another side to COVID. I think the economy will need stimulus. And I think sport and racing can play a strong part in that. This is an activity in which Ireland, does well internationally. That's been proven time and again. It's a big employer in rural Ireland, and it's something in which, successive governments have recognised that and have supported it, and that is great. And, I think the game gives more back to the country than it gets. And I think, when we're all recovering from COVID, that will be more needed than ever. So you're right, the base is probably better than it was, and that's good. As I said, there's elements of the game which have been able to keep going through the lockdown. But as I said, without racing and without a structured racing calendar, that loses its purpose after a while.
Okay, you put together a good series of business supports that you published and pushed out there to the sector a couple of weeks ago. Was there a good take up on that? Because they stretched into psychological as well as financial. It was a fairly coherent and holistic approach to it almost.
Yeah, we've done that over the last number of years through Horse Racing Ireland. We've put up a strong confidential industry support service. There's a lot of people working in the industry. It's a pressurized industry. Long hours, a lot of pressure on the competitors. So we've offered a whole range of activities for the participants in the industry, ranging from, jockeys, programs about, diet, about, proper training, proper physical training. The old days of the jockeys, going to the race meeting, grabbing a burger on the way home, and all that sort of stuff. They're gone now. So that's program of support is there all the way through, and that ranges as far as confidential financial advice. If someone needs someone to talk to, someone's feeling under pressure, all that sort of stuff. So we've ramped up that side of things on the one side, to just provide assistance for people within the sector, which is it's a close-knit sector, and a lot of a lot of the times you have to be very tough, or appear to be very tough in the game, which is not the easiest. We've also put in place, as best we could, to complement the government schemes, financial support. So, fortunately, for jockeys who immediately just stop their earnings are predicated completely by racing taking place. We've had various benevolent funds that, have been saving for a rainy day, if you can put it that way. So we've actioned those jockey benevolent funds, and they've been very well received. The two areas that are, or 2 or 3 areas that are, and we've also waived and repaid certain fees that on-course bookmakers pay us, to allow some leeway to them. The bookmakers worry us. On-course, as I said, their ability to earn has just disappeared. And the race courses in general, their business model is very much based on a combination of selling media rights, pictures of race meetings, and their commercial revenues from bars, from admissions, from catering. So they're both gone. So we will need, over a period of time, to put supports in place for our race courses to ensure they all pull through. So that's going to be one challenge. And I think we need to make sure, the smaller trainer doesn't get marginalized out of this. As I said earlier, if owners are less inclined to have horses in training, the smaller trainers training for the small owners are probably the more vulnerable ones on that. So we're working on a number of schemes to try and help there. And the challenge of that, Rob, is that it's a moving target. That if someone said to you, you're going to be shut and you're going to be for X number of weeks, and you're going to be behind closed doors for the first Y number of weeks after that, you could make a plan. But who knows? And when you see events in August, September already starting to drop, like the Rose of Tralee or the horse show or the Galway races, you do wonder, is this just going to be a lost year for sport? I hope not.
Yeah, it changes all the time. We did a session earlier on, and it was an open session amongst members, and it was very split as to when the return of contact sport might be. That there was roughly a third that thought we might get it back in the summer, another third that it would be after, and another third that thought it would be into 2021. So stadium sport is going to be different to that as well. We've lost a number of the key sort of moments that would define the course of the sporting calendar, and particularly the racing calendar. So Fairyhouse and the Irish Grand National, I know there's potential for rescheduling that. We've lost Punchestown, but just before we move on to those, the one big festival and the kind of the crowning glory that we didn't lose was Cheltenham, and there was a growing sense over the course of those 4 days, which moved from, sure, Cheltenham is brilliant and we all want to be supporting and we all want to be there. By the time Friday came around, and no fault of Cheltenham, no fault of racing, but there was a real sense that this wasn't the right thing to be doing. You were over there for a couple of the days. How did it feel there? And do you have any regret about the fact that maybe it wasn't called on the Wednesday evening, that maybe we should just pull the shutters down on this?
It's very interesting. I think that was the very week where the whole thing ramped up with Corona, and I went there for the first 2 days, and it was remarkable. That I came back to a different country on Wednesday night to the one I left on Monday. I think on the Tuesday, the pictures, the images from Italy started to come through in great detail, and at that stage, that was the week. By the end of that week, we were racing behind closed doors in Ireland. I think with hindsight, people would recognise that Cheltenham would have been much better if we went behind closed doors. Not a decision that we have any control over. It's entirely a matter for the British authorities and the British government. And in fairness, it's the same time, and you've heard all this before, there was a full set of Premier League matches that Saturday, Champions League match on the Wednesday night in Liverpool with Atletico Madrid. All the stories about school skiing trips, and it was still 10 days before the pubs were closed in Ireland. So social distancing, as we know it now, was not really that well known at that time. The irony of Cheltenham is that while Cheltenham was going ahead and people were at the races, the pubs back in Ireland were packed with people watching Cheltenham. So it's certainly it couldn't have come at a worse week. It was unfortunate because it was the last major sporting event to take place. Should it have taken place? With hindsight, probably no. But that's everyone's wise after the event. And I think I have some sympathy for the Cheltenham authorities there as well, that the idea of just saying in the middle of their festival, we're aborting after 2 days, or we're going behind closed doors, when your government is telling you not to, or the government is saying we're happy for you not to, and when you've got so many people in situ, it's not easy. But I think I hope anyway, from an Irish racing point of view, the decisions that we were able to control, a lot of the people who were at Cheltenham, they came back, they did the responsible thing, they self-isolated. And, as I said, we moved immediately behind closed doors after the Taoiseach made his speech on the 12th of March. So by Friday the 13th, we were behind closed doors in Dundalk, and we did so for 10 days, or 10 race meetings until the general lockdown. So we followed the government advice all along, and I would be happy to do that all the way through, because I think the Irish government have handled this situation very well and very competently, and it's not one that anyone has ever experienced before. Cheltenham was, as I said, it was the very week where the thing ramped up.
Yeah, I think you're right, and part of how the government have handled it well up until this point. It has been said though that actually the lockdown was the easy part of this. That coming out of the lockdown and getting back to something like normal is going to be even harder. Now, you've got experience of racing behind closed doors, which is pretty much unique in Irish sporting circles anyway, is that you've actually been through some of the processes. You know some of the, the points, the pinch points that you have to work on. That's given you confidence to say that you're ready to go when public health advice is that it is ready to go. Do you have any idea in your own mind as to how much notice you might get of that, or how much notice you would need to actually get things rolling again?
Well, no, we're racing ready. So, with the technicalities of, advertising a race meeting and taking entries for a race meeting and, preparing the track, you would probably need a week or 10 days notice before you would start again. But ironically, unlike other sports, and I take no pleasure in saying this, but because they're sad places, but a race course, when you strip out the public, when you strip out the bookmakers, when you strip out all the public facing aspects, they're actually ideally suited to social distancing. You can run racing and respect the requirements of social distancing. You need to enforce it, and you need to enforce it rigidly. But, our industry is probably well used to, biosecurity issues because of the health of horses aspect to it. So, even though some of these countries were at the heart of the crisis, racing continued uninterrupted in Hong Kong, in Japan, in Australia, in Singapore, behind closed doors without the public. And as you say, we had 10 race meetings before the lockdown. And I know, talking to our colleagues in Germany, they will resume racing behind closed doors on Monday next, the 4th, and France will resume the following Monday, the 11th. So it is different, but as I said, they're not race meetings as we know it, but it does fulfill the requirement that you're getting these horses run, you're getting a bit of prize money out into the system, you're getting people earning a living again. Maybe people might want to, in America or in the Far East, might see a horse that they might want to buy, so that trade resumes again. I think it can be an example of how a sector has to adapt, to a new reality to survive. But I think we're completely guided by the medical authorities and the Department of Health. And we've said that to government. But we've also said, if you're way, and you're right what you say, closing down is easy. It's opening up as the hard bit. You have to do a risk reward calculation, and what we're saying is, look, we can do this at a very, at a zero risk, by the procedures we put in place. And there's a reward here in that you can at least get one sector moving off the government life support schemes that are in place. But that's only at the right time, Rob, when the country has got over what we're going through at the moment.
Okay, the timing of that is probably as important, maybe even more important in racing. You mentioned earlier about the classic season and the fact that racing and breeding is based on one generation, 1 year after another. I think we're coming up on the weekend that would have been around about the time of the Guineas taking place over in England, and a few weeks ahead of the Irish ones. The whole bloodstock industry, we've got foals that have been born over the last number of weeks that they can't be stopped for an economic or a health lockdown. Is it more imperative perhaps that we do get going sooner rather than later? Could you imagine the Irish 1,000, 2,000 guineas being run at the Curragh in front of a wonderful grandstand, but an empty one?
Oh, that would be a dream at the moment, Rob. If we thought we were able to run the Guineas races, we would run them, behind closed doors, because it's quite interesting, when we speak about racing, and sometimes we say, is it a sport? Is it an industry? What is it? How do you define it? Something like this does reflect it, because, even though people aren't able to go to the event, even though betting shops are closed, so sometimes racing is deemed to be just an adjunct of the gambling industry. There's still a need to run racing, because behind that there's a whole significant industry in the country, and Ireland is very good at this, at breeding horses, at producing horses, at selling them. we export over 60% of the horses we produce every year. They're in demand around the world because of our climate, because of our soil structure. Irish horses are sought after. And that trade is driving a lot of the sort of rural economies in counties like Meath or Kildare or Tipperary. In order to drive that, you need to have the shop window, which is the racetrack. And as I said, in order to have the purpose to the breeding sector, so for example, there's a particular category of sales called breeze up sales they're for 2-year-old horses, just about ready to race. So people will buy them, speculators will buy them as yearlings in October or November of their first year. They like the look of the horse. They'll bring the horse on for the next 6 months, break it, train it, develop it to a baby racehorse ready to race, and then they bring them to the sales throughout Europe. And there's 5 of them held in France, the UK, and 1 in Ireland around this time of the year. They've all been cancelled or postponed at the moment. But when you strip back into it, you look at the sort of 800 odd horses that are sold at those sales. 90% of them are Irish horses. They're sourced in Ireland. So Ireland is the breadbasket of Europe, if you'll excuse the pun, when it comes to supplying horses. So that's a whole aspect of racing and the business of racing and the commerce of our sector that's not usually apparent when people just have the association with the Sport of Kings or the Best Dressed Ladies competitions or the fun of the fair at Galway or Cheltenham or whatever. So, one of the fascinations to me of our game is the various different aspects of it and the passion that different people bring to different parts of it. But it's become very transparent now when you shut down completely that racing is a multifaceted thing. So I think all that points to perhaps the scope for racing being one of the early sports to get going again. And on a very basic level, wouldn't that be great to provide some sporting entertainment for us to focus on and look at?
It would, absolutely. I've been lucky enough. I've been down to some of the sales down in Goffs and Tattersalls. It wouldn't exactly be a socially distant environment to be operating in. How do you think breeding might actually sort of cope with this now? Because as you say, some of the key sales coming up on top of us now and will be there throughout the summer. Is there a potential that we might just have to pause for a year? Is there a potential that you might have 2 classic champions in a single year, or
no, because that dictates. You mentioned the Guineas, and the Guineas winners each year are probably the most sought after horses to retire to stud the following year. So you miss the chance when you're a year older. But it's quite interesting what will happen, and what happened in the last 2 weeks in Australia, and I know the Irish sales companies are already talking about it again, is having virtual sales. So we will have a situation where some of these horses, and the nature of those breeze up sales is that the horse gallops, so that the buyers see the horse galloping over 2 or 3 furlongs, and they're timed, and they're then vetted and inspected as any normal purchase of a horse is at the sales ring. But I think what they'll do now is they might go ahead with the gallop, and that can be done in a socially distant fashion because it's one horse galloping on its own against the clock. The sale will be a virtual sale. It'll be done online rather than in person. It happened in Australia for their major yearling sale about 3 weeks ago, and they were pleasantly surprised to find that the turnover in the midst of the corona COVID crisis was only down by a factor of 20% or something like that. So again, there's adaptation there. And also we're just in the middle, where we're in the second half now of the thoroughbred breeding season, which runs from February to June, and they've been able to find ways of continuing that during the lockdown with associates. So basically, if a mare is going to be mated with a stallion, they now have a way of electronically of making all the arrangements, the paperwork, etc. So literally, the owner of the mare arrives at the stud farm with their horse, hands over the horse, in a socially distant fashion, and gets the horse back. So there's a degree of creativity at play here, which is interesting to see.
Yeah.
But
it'll be interesting. I hope we don't get to a point where the horses have to be socially distant during the mating process. That would be
most of the horses I back, Rob, are socially distanced from the rest of the field.
That would be the ultimate social distancing. All right. Just a couple of last things before I let you go back to the real world. You've signed a deal just in the last couple of days with the UK Tote, whereby you will have now with the Irish Tote and the UK Tote an alliance that will last over the next 7 years. Just how much of a factor is that going to be in generating additional revenue streams for the sport here?
I think it's very exciting. The Irish Tote, by global standards, is a small betting operation. Ireland has only got 350 odd race meetings, and it's a small activity. What we've seen in recent years has been a huge degree of consolidation in the betting market. So Betfair and Paddy Power have merged, Coral and Ladbrokes merged, and there's further mergers coming along the way. So a small operator such as Tote Ireland just doesn't have the access to capital, access to marketing skill sets, or access to product development skills that a major operator competing in that market needs. The UK Tote is a much bigger operation, and new owners have come into the UK Tote in recent years and took over the Tote this year, running the Tote of the UK. So we've entered an arrangement. It's not a commercial arrangement in the sense that the Tote will remain 100% owned by Horse Racing Ireland, and the license will remain in the name of Tote Ireland. But we will partner with the UK Tote, who will run all the off-course business, but most importantly, the international sales and promotion of betting, Tote betting, Irish racing. This is a major potential growth area for pool betting in the future. And we could not do that on our own, so we've partnered with the UK Tote. We will continue to run the on-course Tote, but that Tote betting struggles to compete in a cutthroat, very open betting market. Long term, there's potentially a strong future for the Tote, because it may be seen as a safe form of gambling, or an acceptable form of gambling. So I think we need the alliance with a big partner, and we've concluded that and announced it today. So that's exciting. But it means the Tote will be the Irish Tote will be a smaller operation, sort of new business models to run the on-course operation. But I think it's got potential to grow and give a greater return to racing in the future.
Okay. Just to conclude, I guess, this is a leadership series, and you've been out on the Curragh seeing some of the horses working, talking to some of the trainers. Jockeys will be hanging on your every word, trainers, owners, breeders. As the leader of the industry, what would be your message as we stand now, sort of in April going into May, as to how you think we might come out of this, at what rate and to what extent?
Well, I think the first thing I would say to people, and I have been saying to people in the industry, is to mind themselves and look after themselves. Without people, we don't have an industry. And I think this crisis has brought out the good in an awful lot of people. Not just in racing, but throughout the country. And for the last week, we've had jockeys and trainers and GA players, and everyone swallowing raw eggs to beat the band to help young Dan. And that's, it's been lovely to see those sort of things. So I'd say to the people to mind themselves. We have a great industry. We have a strong base. This will take a lot of getting over. The consequence of this will be here for a long time. But I think our main objective will be to ensure that as many elements of the industry, be it race courses, trainers, jockeys, breeders, owners, can come through this unscathed. We've got a great product, as I said. Irish horses are in demand, and Irish trainers and jockeys are renowned as among the best in the world. So I think it's something that we're good at, and there will be better days ahead. But for the moment, I think the crisis demands all our attention, and that's the thing. People have to mind themselves through that crisis, and then look to the future where we can enjoy going back racing again.
we will look forward intently to those days, and hopefully racing will be among the first to come back and give us a lift. Thank you very much, Brian. Great insight there as always, and the very best of luck with bringing the industry back. Sport for Business will continue to try and bring together the worlds of sport and business. We've got a whole program of live webinars, virtual meetings, and both video and written content on the website. The Sport for Business Daily Digest drops into your email boxes every morning at around about 9:30, and we will continue to talk to the great and the good across the industry, giving us words of hope like you have just done there, Brian. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rob.